All right, so in this chapter, we're going to focus on communication and new media and focus specifically on the different types of media like our cell phones, social networks, um, email, all that kind of stuff that we use to communicate. Basically, new media is a technological interface that allows users to communicate, interact, personalize, and own media. So, this isn't just stuff where you can communicate messages, it's stuff where you can actually create a user face, where you can actually create a profile. You can do things such as interact, and you can kind of create your own identity through this. So, these are things like Facebook, Twitter, email, text messaging, blogs, news feeds. With all these things, we can kind of individualize them and tailor them to our needs. We can present ourselves a certain way with these. We can interact with people a certain way with these. We can personalize these in our own ways. We can do a lot with these. And in a way, we can kind of create our own online identity. And that really influences the ways in which we communicate with each other. But the keys to this is knowing it's a technological interface where we can basically do a lot of the same things we could do in face to face communication, only and honestly, in certain ways, in a more enhanced way. So this kind of is where oral tradition comes into play. And oral tradition is basically cultural or traditional messages that are verbally passed down through generations. And in the past, it was primary orality. It was where culture that has no knowledge of technology beyond the spoken word. So the information people gathered and the things that they heard and the messages that were delivered to them all really relied on spoken word, relied on somebody saying them because they didn't have the technologies to record them or replay them or go look them up on a computer or anything like that. Whereas secondary orality is when verbal communication is sustained through other technologies, such as the telephone or the internet. This is where we're able to actually sustain things and maintain things because we can record them, we can audio record them, we can look them up, we can type them up and put them somewhere and store them for us to come back to later. So it's kind of more sustained, it's more structured, it's more set in stone in terms of passing messages down through various generations. There's written and print tradition. Written is like an early form of communication. I mean, written word goes all the way back to hieroglyphics. There's print. This is the creation and distribution of printed text, and this is when Gutenberg first created the printing press. So these are some of our first earliest traditions in terms of passing messages down through generation to generation. But we moved on from there, and so once we get past just that pure oral and just kind of standard writing, we move into what's called the first media age. And this focuses more on media, such as audio and visual recordings, radio, telegraph, and television. Some of the first things that were kind of created back in the early 1900s. It's highly centralized production. Only a few editors have control of informing the public. A few at the top kind of play a big role in what messages are being disseminated. It's one-way communication. Viewers receive the message, and that's all they get. They can't really react to it. I mean, they can react to it, but they can't really edit it. They can't change it. It's what you see and what you hear is what you get. And kind of one of the first theories to examine this was classical medium theory by McLuhan in 1964, which basically got at the medium is the message. I'm sure some of you have heard this before. But what this gets at is what channel you use, what medium you choose, whether that's a text message or an email or face to face or writing a letter, that influences the meaning behind the message. Moving on from the first media age was the second media age. And this is where we get the introduction of interactive technologies. Things where we don't just take it in and digest it, but we can actually play with it. We can reproduce it. We can change it. We can retweet it. We can edit that post. We can do what we want, kind of create our own ways of sending these things down generation to generation. It's the exploration of the numerous possibilities of interactive media. It's not about just decreasing broadcast media, but it's all about using it differently. We're in an era now where media is used very, very differently, and we actually contribute to it. We don't just take it in. We don't just listen to the television. We don't just listen to the radio broadcast. We can get online and comment on things. We can influence the messages that are being created in the media. And again, it focuses on the interaction lead to new media. It describes the unique, customized communication styles of today. So it's what we live in now. It's the things that we're able to do. We're able to go onto blogs and contribute to them. We're able to retweet things. We're able to go onto Facebook statuses and like them. We're able to follow organizations and provide them feedback and write reviews on them. We're able to make a huge contribution in the media that we're intaking now and digesting and sharing with other people, which was not the case 50 to 60 years ago. It helps us to connect and engage. The whole philosophy of this class and the textbook we're using is the communication age, and it's the fact that it's still growing and evolving, and it'll always be growing and evolving. It always will help. We'll always be able to connect more and engage more in mass capacities because of these skill sets that it's allowing us to develop. New media, it's many speaking to many. Whereas traditional media was one speaking to many, it's many people speaking to many people. Traditional media was one-way communication, it's two-way communication now. Individuals are able to go back and forth in media these days. It's democratizing, meaning that individuals are able to participate and put their input in, and it's also allowing us to retain our individuality. We're able to express ourselves, we're able to share the pictures we want, we're able to create the profiles we want, we're able to provide our actual opinions and thoughts about a product when we review it. It's very interactive. It allows us to connect. It allows us to engage in our media, whereas, again, traditionally, we just didn't have that ability. So new media theory focuses on a few key things that we're going to go over. First off, interactive is key to new media theory. You can send and receive digital messages in almost real time. I mean, you can go on the internet and comment on something, and that feedback is there and provided. You're allowed to do that now. You have that platform, whereas, again, traditional media, you couldn't do that. It's personalized. You can manage the appearance of new media to fit your identity, like with your Facebook pages, your Instagrams, your Twitter accounts, all these things, your even your Snapchats. I mean, we're able to take these things and kind of tailor them the way that we want and kind of present our identity in a certain way with these things. They're creative, they're fun, and they're an entertaining form of self-expression. They're flexible. They're constantly adapting to newer changing requirements. I mean, if you think about Snapchat, it was like the first one to come along with like the story, right? And then Facebook adopted it, followed by Instagram, and all these different technologies, all these different medias, they're constantly trying to keep up with one another because there's just so much competition. And to lead to that, it's always evolving. It's consistently changing. It's never the same. Media from here on out, the way that we use it and how it presents itself and how we work and play with it is always going to be evolving and changing. So thinking about this, we all have an online identity. All of us do this. I mean, we post pictures of our food or our gym selfies or whatever to kind of present a specific identity. We comment on things a certain way. We write statuses a certain way so people kind of see us in kind of an image that we want to present. And computer mediated communication is one of the first theories that actually got at this and captured this. This is human communication facilitated by new media. So this is like in chat rooms, email, message boards, online games, all these things. We can have avatars, images that represents our online identity. We can separate physical appearances and nonverbal cues from communications. It may or may not represent one's true self. We can actually craft identities that are not 100% us in real life, but we can tailor them and we can change them. And now this is good and this is bad. I mean, we can essentially do this to be manipulative and kind of influence people in the wrong way. But I mean, we can also do this to gain some self-esteem and some positive views of ourselves and, a positive image in a lot of ways. So we have an online identity. We create this with all the media that we use. It's a matter of recognizing kind of how you do it and what you do with it. So if we kind of build from the beginning and think about some traditional concepts of identity formation, a lot of these theories from back in the day, back in the 50s and the 60s, really still apply to this new media and computer-mediated communication. Theory of self-presentation, the theory of everyday self. Basically, Irving Goffman came up with this theory in 1959, symbolic interactionism. And basically, what this theory gets at is identity is created through interaction with others. We don't know who we are until other people agree to it or reflect it back to us. Or if we perform a certain way, people are actors playing different roles. What he gets at is a different context of your life. At work, you present yourself a certain way. When you're with your friends, you communicate and present yourself a certain way. When you're in the classroom, you communicate and present yourself a certain way. He really looked at us as actors, and we were on different stages, and we would play different roles all over in the world, depending on what kind of performance was necessary. And those performances, combined with the way people expressed how they viewed us and how they saw us and confirmed how we expressed ourselves, all this came together to really, this is how our identities are created, how we come to think about ourselves and how we express ourselves. And this is the same thing connecting it to new media. We create different online roles and we have multiple roles simultaneously online. So you can take this old theory of self-presentation and now new media has just expanded it even more. We have more roles to play, and we have more roles to play simultaneously than we did in the past, if you consider and factor in all the things that we do on new media. CMC impacts individual identity. So again, computer-mediated communication. It impacts our individual identity because we can play with our identities. We can use filters. We can post things in certain ways. We can show certain images of ourselves. We can post certain statuses. We can retweet, copy and paste things. We can note an absence of gender cues. I mean, there's not so much. I mean, we obviously typically present our gender on there, but it's not always as apparent in certain contexts. And they vary in space and time, meaning sometimes they are things where it's instantaneous or it can travel really far, and other times they're more close knit and smaller networks, and they're a little bit longer to kind of dissect and get out there. So the development of self online, first, we have screen names, names people use to identify and locate others. This may or may not give an accurate representation. We can have multiple names at once, so we use screen names as a way of kind of developing an online self. Even our email addresses, these are usernames that are like screen names. There's different usernames used for different correspondence. If you think about your different email addresses, you probably shouldn't have like sexy blonde babe as your professional email address, or that might be okay with your friends. But again, all of these things we need to consider in terms of how they relate to our online identity and how people view us and come to understand who we are as individuals. We have blogs where we can create content, develop and maintain a website to display creative work. You have control over that content. People often create blogs with a goal in mind for a specific reason, whether that's to enhance something we care about, or promote something we care about, or express ourselves in certain ways. We have personal profiles, which provide short descriptions about your age, sex, race, physical features, affiliations, and interests. And we can do this. This can be honest or this can be fake. This can be based on fictionalized or ideal versions of self. We can make ourselves look, basically a little bit better, or, what we feel is a little bit better. We can idealize things. We can augment certain things about ourselves. We can highlight the good things about ourselves and kind of cover up or not even bring into play the things that we don't want people to know about ourselves. Social media is where this takes place more than anything. This is web-based service that allows individuals to create a public profile, maintain and view a list of users who share a common interest. We can construct public and semi-public profile in a bounded system where everybody's connected. We can form a list of other users to share info with. We can view connections between others within the system. We can really control who sees our stuff and who we get to see seeing our stuff. Self-disclosure, again, it's peripheral information. It's minor information about the self. It happens more in CNC than when face-to-face. We're more willing to share information about ourselves because we feel like we have more control over who's seeing it, how we're expressing it, how they're reading it, so on and so forth. So the ways in which we create our identity and the information that we share is very different in online media settings. And social information processing is a theory that relates to computer-mediated communication that gets at this. This was developed by Walther in 1955, and this basically explains how CMC and face-to-face communication are both successful in building relationships. We can develop and build relationships both in online context and in face-to-face context. And that's basically because relationships develop only to the extent that people first gain information about each other. And then people use that initial information to form impressions or mental images of the other individual. And we can share this information and gather this information both in a face-to-face setting just as well as we can on an online setting. And so we can form relationships with people online, and this is where online dating first started to happen, or pen pals, things like that. We can form relationships with people and we don't even have to actually meet them face to face.